Okay, let's start then. I would like to welcome you all here. We tried to start a little bit earlier than usual because from the feedback we received, everybody wanted to start earlier. And then when we actually try to do it, people don't really come earlier that much. But that's the feedback we can use next time. Okay, so we have a couple of technical things. There is a poster there and poster over there at the wall where you can see the Wi-Fi and the password for the Wi-Fi. So if you want to use internet, you can do that. And we also have Slido, which we will be using for questions. So you can use the Wi-Fi to connect to internet, and then you can go to slido.com, type in the UX forum, and ask any questions you want. You don't have to give your name if you are afraid of that. But if you're not, you can also raise your hand and ask the questions later after the talk. So that's okay as well. Do you guys have any questions before we begin? I should check the Slido as well. Okay. So let's start with our first speaker. It will be Zsuzsa Kovács. She told me not to say that she's amazing, so I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to say Zsuzsa is a really great person, and I had the pleasure of working with her for 1 year. She organizes Amuse Conference, which is one of the best conferences in Middle Europe for user experience people. And she'll be talking about user research. So, big applause for Zsuzsa Kovács.
So now you know you shouldn't ask Toya not to do stuff, because then he will anyway. Okay, so I don't know the guy. I guess this is my background. Sorry, so we need some tech still. Just a sec.
Do you want to go on mirror?
Mm-hmm.
Arrangement.
Okay. So, it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to be in Bratislava. I can also tell, to je veľmi pekné, že som tu dneska, lebo trochu rozprávam aj po slovensky. But this talk will be in English, because I cannot talk UX in Slovak. So if you have questions, please do it in English still. So I'm going to talk to you about detectives, which is like a mysterious topic, but you will understand in a sec why I'm going to talk about detectives. So first of all, my name is Zsuzsa Kovács, and as Toya also said, I'm working for Prezi for 6.5 years now. I've been a lot of things at Prezi. I used to be a UX researcher, then I was the UX research lead at Prezi. I was leading some amazing researchers, and I was also very lucky because I had Toya on my team, who is an amazing UX researcher. So if you want to learn about this topic, just go to him. And now I'm a product manager, so that was on the website that you might have seen. Yeah, so roles are changing. This is also something that happened to me. But I thought that I will start this talk with telling you a little bit about how we do research at Prezi and how the whole software development is done in very, very high levels. So we work in so-called cross-functional teams. What does it mean? It means that we have a lot of roles in a team working closely together. So we have a product manager who is responsible for defining what the team should do and how that things should be done or in what order. We have a product designer and a UX researcher, and that is not the common way of setting up teams, because usually companies have UX designers, what means that one person is doing both the design and the research about it. At Prezi we have this role separated, which I actually like a lot. And it has a lot of pros, of course, probably also cons. I only think about the pros, or I believe in them. And then, of course, we have the engineers, and we have other roles as well, like QA, data analysts. So there are a lot of people responsible for different things, and they work together to solve the problems. And I also thought I'd tell you a little bit about what kind of research we do. So first of all, we have so-called discovery research. It means that before we would start to solve a problem, and this part is led by the UX researcher, we are doing interviews, we are doing diary studies, field research, or even shadowing to learn about the problem that we want to solve. So this is led by the UX researcher, but the designer is also always part of the research part, as it's very important. And then the product designer takes over the lead. So then the prototype is done, which is a solution proposal for a certain problem. And once it's done, of course, it's also done closely together with the researcher. And then the researcher takes the lead again and is going to do usability tests or data analysis or A/B tests to see if this proposal, this solution idea is really the good solution for the problem. So this is in, like in big or high level how the research is done at Prezi. And so I started with, explaining you how many things I already did just at this one company. And I used to be an engineer when I started, a software engineer. So I did many things in IT, but in fact, and deep down in my heart, I always wanted to be a detective. So I watched a lot of detective movies and series. I don't know, what are the detective movies of your childhood? My detectives are Inspector Gadget and Derek. I'm older than you, most probably. So we had Detective Derek, from Germany. On TV, and so these were my idols. But of course later on I'm still a big series fan and detective fan, so I brought you a few of my favorite detectives to explain you a little bit about what QX researchers, and when we are doing research, what can we learn from these detectives. So first of all, I thought that I convince you that detectives and UX researchers are not so far away. So basically, I can say that I fulfilled my own dream and I became a detective in a way. And I thought about starting to show you how detectives look like, right? This is a group of very serious detectives. I guess you know them, right? Who of you seen the series Sherlock Holmes, the new one? Yeah, a few of you. Cool. So this is how detectives look, right? This is how very serious UX researchers look, right? We took some very funny photos a while back. So you see, we are very, very similar, but aside of the jokes, let's see what other things are, similar in the two groups. So you can see there a face that might be familiar for you in the back. Okay, so first of all, both of these teams or both of these professions are looking for answers, right? We are solving some mysteries. We want to understand, we have a lot of questions and we are looking for the answers. So that is something very obvious thing in common. We also go and talk to those people who were involved. So, in our case, they are called different. We call them users and not suspects. But still, we go and we want to learn from these people about the context where the crime happened or, how certain things are done. We question also these people. These are, of course, not witnesses, but they are the users or clients or customers. And we also use cool gadgets. So it's not only detectives, who have the newest stuff, but we work in IT, so we also have the newest stuff, right? We have these cool things at hand. For example, the thing in my hand, which is a recorder, because we also collect evidence. We call them research artifacts, but those are basically evidence, right? We capture all the things about how people do certain things. And we make photos, we make videos, we have voice recordings, just like detectives do, and then we, of course, analyze those. We also like to visit the crime scene, because we know that if we want to know, or learn the most about certain processes, we have to go there where these things happen and watch very carefully. And we also like to work with partners. So it's not only Sherlock Holmes who have a partner, or Derek who has someone to work with, but we also like to work in pairs. In Prezi, the pair is the designer UX researcher pair, but of course we also like to invite other people to the UX research sessions, because we know that in a team we can work best. And if you think about it, detectives also have cross-functional teams, because it's not just one guy doing everything, right? But they also have a separate person for analyzing blood samples, or looking for foot or fingerprints, and looking for. So everybody has their own specific thing, so they also work in a cross-functional team, if you think about it. And so let's see what other things we do. Oh, look at it. It seems that we both analyze and collect information, right? We collect a lot of information, everything that we can get, and then we try to see patterns, we try to see gaps, connections. So that's why it's very good to, for example, put these things on the wall. So it seems like detectives and UX researchers both have this compulsive need of putting everything on the wall and then, draw lines and see connections. So this is also something that we do similarly. And then the most important part is that we talk to people and we want to know their secrets. Of course, the feel of these discussions is very different, right? Because we are not like lighting them, to the face, and we are not, want them to cry. But sometimes it happens because we want to know about their secrets. We want to understand, about their failures, where they face problems. And it's not easy to talk about, so it's also our problem or our biggest challenge to get these people to tell us these things. And we want them to talk about their fears, what they don't want to happen with them around these software things, and failures. And we want them to tell the truth, and that is also an important aspect of research, right? We don't want people to tell us lies, which might happen also in a UX session. And so that's why when we think about who to learn from, it's not the bad cops, because the bad cops has very, very bad ways to get people to tell them things, and I don't think the bad cops always hear the truth, because they have very aggressive processes or methods. So it's more of the good cops, the good detectives, that we can actually learn a lot from when we want to be good UX researchers. So I brought you 5 of my favorite detectives. Let's go through them and let's see what we can learn from all of them. So I will start with Sherlock Holmes. I already mentioned him. And so how I will introduce you these things, I have short video clips, and before each of the video clips I will tell you what are those things, those clues you should look for in the video. What is that specific thing that detective is doing the best. So Sherlock Holmes is, living in London, and one of his superpowers, or 2 of his superpowers, are observe detail. So he's really good in observing the tiniest thing that other people would never see and never give it meaning, and to do deductions, so deduct things that are kind of for him very obvious. For us it's amazing, but to learn from these hidden things that he connects. So let's see this clip. And we don't have voice. Can we get some voice, please?
When I met you for the first time yesterday, I said Afghanistan or Iraq. You looked surprised.
Yes, how did you know?
I didn't know, I saw. Your haircut, the way you hold yourself, said military. But your conversation as you entered the room
Different from my day.
said trained at bar, so army doctor, obvious. Your face is tanned, but no tan above the wrists. You've been abroad, but not sunbathing. Your lips really bad when you walk, but you don't ask for a chair when you stand, like you've forgotten about it. So it's at least partly psychosomatic. That says the original circumstances of the injury were traumatic. Wounded in action then. Wounded in action, suntan, Afghanistan or Iraq.
You said I had a therapist.
Got a psychosomatic lip, of course you've got a therapist.
Okay, so I know it's very hard to follow because he talks super fast as well, right? Because his brain is, I guess, going faster than our brain. But what he did is he observed very little details, and he could find out things that this person never told them. Now, of course, we don't need to be as, maximum observers as him, who's probably very high on some scales, some weird scales. But what we can learn from Sherlock Holmes is that when we are doing research with users, we shouldn't only listen to what they say, but we should also always look at them. And we can learn a lot from their facial expressions, from their body language. For example, we can catch them when they are not telling us the truth. Because it happens. And why is that? Because people want to please us when we do research. They want to be helpful. And so sometimes they get into these things that are not completely true. And we can see it on their face. Or for example, they want to be polite with us, and they will say, yeah, sure, this site looks very, very helpful. But when you look on their face, you know that this is actually not the truth. They just want to be polite or nice to us. So what we can learn from him is that, not only listen to your users, but also always watch them, because sometimes how they behave or their body language reveals much more than what they say actually. So my next favorite is Rust from True Detective. Who have seen the first season of True Detective? I know we are at 3. Yeah, it's been a while, right? So I wouldn't call him completely, he's not certainly the good guy or the good cop. If you've seen the series, you know what I mean. But he actually has some very, very nice ways of showing deep empathy to people and getting them to confess crimes or very deep secrets. And he's very good in showing sympathy with these people. So look for these in the videos.
You're not bad. It's not you. There's a weight, and it's got its fish hooks in your heart and your soul. What you did is not your fault. It's not. It's, what is that? It's a 4-letter word, S-I-D-S, but I mean, what is it? It's an old word, like a curse. Not a language anyone speaks. But it's what happened to Jessica here first. They said, your second, Jody, 23 days old. The autopsy showed no signs of trauma, so SIDS. I lost one myself, Charmaine. I lost a marriage too. So you're third. You had him last year.
Jesus, lady, you ever hear of a fucking condom?
Birth control's a sin. Child is a wonderful thing.
A child is wonderful.
So if you remember this scene, she's going to confess on killing his own kids. So this is a very rough thing that he makes this woman do, simply by showing empathy and showing sympathy to these people. So of course, yeah, you know, our UX sessions are not so intense as the scene that you've just seen. But I really like the first one, in the one in which Rust is telling this witness that it's not their fault. And I thought that this is something that we are also doing on usability tests, right? So in Eastern Europe, we grew up in schools, they always told us that if we don't know something, it's our fault. And then we have to switch our mindset when we do UX research, because UX research tells people, if you don't understand the screen, it's not your fault, it's our fault, right? We did it right, or we didn't do it right. That's why you don't understand it. So this is something we also need to tell users when we do usability tests. You know, if you don't understand that button, it's not your fault. You know, it's something that we need to improve on. And the second one is something from which, so the message here is that if you want people to tell you their secrets, hopefully smaller ones than the ones in the scene, you need to be empathetic to these people. You need to, you know, show that you feel with them. If they tell you a sad story, you need to be sad, because you need to, you know, be a partner who understands their feelings and emotions and is sympathetic and empathetic. So this is something that we can learn from Rust. And sometimes we even need to say it out loud. So if the user faces a very bad bug while you do the test, you have to say, I'm very sorry that, you know, this now happened. Or when they tell you how frustrating a certain experience is for them, you really need to feel for them and say it out loud even. Okay, so let's go to the third one, Brenda. Have any of you seen The Closer and Brenda? No, but nobody knows her. Oh, there's someone. I really recommend it to you. I think this is one of the best detective series that I've ever seen, and that's mainly because of her. And what I've learned from her is that she's really good in also getting people to confess, but she has a different method, and her way is to be one of them. So she's the person who has a lot of clothes in her office, and she can just change completely, like maybe her dress or her hairstyle. She's always thinking on what to do before she goes in and tries to get a witness to confess. And she's really good in being similar to the people she's questioning, and this is how people will open up for her. And she's also really good in hiding her intent. So people never really know what she wants to learn about, and this is how then they will share information. So look how she does it.
Good afternoon, Miss Carr. I'm Deputy Chief Brenda Lee Johnson. I understand that you witnessed an incident earlier on today.
Yeah, it was really horrible. But I didn't really see very much.
You fled the scene.
I had to run. You see, I'm on hold for a national commercial.
Is that why the other ladies didn't mention that you were present at the robbery? They were covering up for you.
I don't know. Is everybody gonna be all right?
No. Your boss is dead, and one of the other ladies just had surgery to remove a bullet from her shoulder. So, murder, attempted murder, robbery. These are all very bad things.
Maybe I should call that number.
What number?
The agencies give us a number to call in an emergency.
The agencies? You work at more than one.
Oh, I didn't want to tell you that. Damn it, I'm just making this all worse. A lot of girls work for more than one place.
And all the agencies give you the same number to call. Well, I hate to break it to you. Whisper. But this is an emergency.
Okay.
So I don't know if you noticed, but when she entered the room, she was doing these things, you know. This is something when you do when you just painted your nails, which of course she didn't do because she's not that kind of detective who is painting nails in the office because she's professional. She did it because she knew that she's going to question a model, a supermodel, and she wanted to be similar to them. And this is also a trick. I don't tell you that you should always paint your nails when you do an interview with a supermodel, but what you should do is you have to be similar to them. When you are talking about, you do interviews about sports, you shouldn't tell your interview person that you actually hate football, because then, this is not something they will open up to you and share their secrets. You need to behave as someone who is also very passionate about the field. That's very important. And she's doing very good at it, and she's like the chameleon. She can always change a little bit to be more similar, and also the way she talks to different people is changing depending on who she's questioning. So I really recommend this series because this is really good in that. And what I also really like in how she questions people is that she's hiding her intent. So she was not telling this lady what she wanted to learn about. She's not actually, so she was not called in for questioning because she's actually a suspect, but she called her in because she wanted to learn more about the agencies and the background of the crime. And so the way she didn't tell her that she wants to learn about this, she slipped some information that she didn't want. And so, what is something similar in UX research? I mentioned you that some people are actually not telling the truth when you do interviews with them or when you do research. And the reason is that they want to be helpful. And they can only tell you lies if they know what you actually want to learn about. I had one interview a few years ago, and there the lady I did the interview with actually made up the whole thing. So nothing was true from what she told me on that interview, because she knew we were looking for people who are doing a certain thing. And then if you know what certain people are looking for, you can behave as one. Also, if you know, or if your interviewee knows what you want to learn about, they can make up these things. So one good way of not getting people into this situation or not letting them lie is that you hide your intent. You don't tell completely what you want to learn about, so they cannot, lie. They have to tell the truth. There is another detective from whom we can actually learn what is the best way to get people to tell the truth, and he has another method for that. So who of you, I don't know if Columbo was something in Slovakia what they played. You know Columbo, the guy? Yeah. I love him, so he's also like one of my childhood heroes. And what he is doing really well is, first of all, he's letting everybody feel like they are the experts of the field, and he has a special way to do that. And also I like the way how he always asks for specifics when he's talking or asking people about certain things. So let's see how he does that.
I'll make this quick, sir. It's not a big thing. I was looking through your nephew's telephone bills and just curious about something. Last month he made 11 calls to your shop here in Beverly Hills, but on the previous month he only made one. Can you account for that?
Well, Freddie's behavior is not that complicated. When he didn't call me, it's because he was making ends meet. And when he did, it's because he needed some money.
And that's why he made all those calls last month, sir?
Yes, sir.
He needed money?
Oh, yes.
Well, that don't add up.
You got a problem with that?
Yeah, something's missing here, because on the 20th, the day he called you for money, that boy went out and he ordered a $175,000 automobile.
What? Who told you that?
Oh, the salesman, sir. Oh, yeah, Freddie. He'd selected the color, and he was going to have it delivered in Europe, in Switzerland, in Bern.
Huh, don't pay any mind to that. Well, that sounds like Freddie. Yeah, it sure does. He could do that. I mean, that kid, he was in the clouds. It was all fantasy.
You mean he would make things up?
Make them up? He told me he was going on tour with Madonna as our private photographer.
It wasn't true?
Made it up.
No kidding.
It's Madonna.
Well, I'll be a son of a gun. So this whole thing about the automobile, that was all in his mind?
Let me tell you the kind of thing he'd do. He'd rent a Rolls Royce for the day, see? So he could go and look at houses for sale and, well, these are $3 and $4 million houses. He'd have these people walking through all the rooms, taking pictures. He's asking questions. He wanted to know if there was room in the back so he could build a tennis court.
No kidding, and he had no money.
Not after he rented that Rolls. He was broke. And it's sad. Because Freddie was a talented boy, but he was mixed up.
Yeah, he sounds mixed up. Well, listen, thank you very much for this information. I'm kind of pressed, sir, so I'm going to run along. Do you remember the name of the real estate agent that showed him those houses?
It was Mary Sidge or something. She's in Beverly Hills. I'll think of it. I'll give you a call.
Much obliged, sir.
Of course, Columbo was always mainly, around actually the people who did the crime, or I guess this guy killed someone, and that's why he was going in several times. But the main thing here is that, Columbo is this guy who always plays like an idiot. Like, if he couldn't really point, like two things together, like he has no idea. And he does that because this way the other person feels like an expert. And I don't say you should always play this complete idiot in a user session, but what is very important when you do interviews to people is that you feel them as the expert. So if you are smarter than them, they will not share, a lot of things. If you behave like someone who doesn't know anything about the field, they will tell you a lot of things because they will feel like the expert and then they will share. Also, when experts are talking to each other, they talk in keywords, and that's not good. So you want to hear the details, and for that you need to behave as you've never heard about that thing. So imagine I did more than 200 interviews on how people do presentations, but you always need to listen to it as if this was the first time you hear it, otherwise people will not share. So if you say oh yeah, sure, I've heard it several times, people will not talk and not share things. So this is one important thing to do, that you always need to make your research participant feel like the expert of the field. And the other thing that he does very nicely is he's always asking for specifics, right? Because then people cannot lie. So yeah, he listens to these stories, blah, blah. He's completely listening and completely into it. And then he asks about, okay, what was the name of the real estate agent? Because if you ask for specifics, people cannot lie to you. If you ask generic questions, it's very easy to make up something. But the specifics, that's something where people cannot lie, because, you cannot make up specific information. So he's really good in these things. And then my last one is Miss Marple. I have to admit that I didn't really know her before I started to prepare for this talk, but I became a complete fan of her. She would be an amazing UX researcher, and there are so many things we can learn from her. So I brought you 4 little clips, and each of it, shows you something really good that a good UX researcher is doing. So one of it is the first video clip will show you how she's always in the background. In half of the Miss Marple movies, you don't even see her. She's somewhere sitting and quiet, and she just observes people and observes how people relate to each other. In the second one, she has a really nice way to open up someone, to tell her things, someone who didn't want to actually share anything, so she's asking for help. The third one will show a nice way how she's asked the question and she asks back because she's keeping her opinion, and I will explain why that is important. And the fourth one is how she gets people to tell stories and how she listens to them.
For work for this sale?
Signed, sealed, and in my room on the top drawer. All academic now, of course.
Understood.
As one door closes, another stands ajar, Lord Caterham.
Indeed.
Had she been with you long, Mrs. Davis?
About 6 months. Paid her rent regular. Seemed like a nice, quiet, respectable person. Though what more I can tell you, I'm sure I don't know. Not that I wouldn't be willing to help if I could.
Oh, thank you, but I do need help. Oh, women know, they feel instinctively so much more than a man can know. Don't you think? When you brought Father...
Automatic writing came quite naturally to me. I didn't even know what it was. I'd just sit there with a pencil in my hand, not have a clue what was happening.
Automatic writing. Now, the difference between that and mindless scribbling is...
Interpretation.
Ah, yes, of course.
You don't believe any of this, do you, Miss Marple?
But you do, don't you?
I don't believe, Miss Marple. I know.
Sorry, never a dull moment.
Oh, you were going to tell me about how you and Mrs. Gray came to the Pale Horse.
It was a bad winter. The village had been cut off by snow. And the landlord's wife...
Yes?
He'd been called to Market Basing, you see, the landlord.
Had he? Yes, I see.
Found her at the bottom of the stairs. A fall, they said. Though I should think it was the cold that did for her in the end.
How terrible.
All that time.
So in the first scene, she didn't even say a word, but she was still there. And by staying, quiet and just listening and seeing how people relate to each other, she could learn a lot about how these people, really, what is behind the scenes. Who is friend with who hates who. So sometimes, if you just stay back and observe things, you can actually learn much more. In the second one, that was an interesting scene because she went to the room of a person who died, and she wanted to learn more information about that person. And the landlady didn't really want to help. She said, yeah, I don't know much, and I don't want to tell you more. And then she, with a little trick, actually she complimented her. She said, oh, but I really need your help, because women understand these things so much better than men, which is, not true. She just said that, and you could see the change on the face of the other person, and then she tells her, of course, much more. So this is also a nice trick, how you can let people tell you things. So, for example, if you compliment them, if you, in the middle of a session when they share a lot of information, you just say, thank you so much. Everything you shared so far was super interesting. They will open up and share more. So a little compliment can actually help open up people and tell more. The third one is really nice. Somebody asks what she thinks, what she believes about a certain thing. And if you are a researcher and you are in a session talking to someone, actually, your opinion and your personality should be in the background. It's not about you. It's about that person you are interviewing. So if you keep your opinion, that's so much better because then they can shine. They are the star, and they will tell you a lot more information. And so, someone asked her what she thinks, and she's, firing back the question, but you believe in it, right? So if it's also something we do on usability tests, right? If they ask us questions, we ask back, have I clicked at the right place? I don't know. Do you think you clicked at the right place? Because it's about learning from them and not about us. And the last clip was about, I really liked it because just with a few questions, she gets someone to tell a complete story, and the way she's listening, the way she's sending, feedback yes, oh, that's terrible. This is something that we also have to do on an interview. If we are just sitting there with a poker face and not doing anything, people will think we are not even interested. So you have to, chime in, you have to react to what people say, and this way they can tell you even more. So these were my research teachers, or I learned a lot from these people, and of course from a lot of others. And just to sum up, what you can bring home from these clips and from these detectives. First of all, not only listen to your users or to the people you are talking to, but also observe, see what they do. What we can learn from Rust is to be empathetic, to show empathy, because people will much more open up to us and they will more trust us, which is an important thing if you want to learn about their secrets. From Brenda, what we learn is that you have to be one of them, you have to be someone similar to them. Even if you are not completely, you should just maybe not emphasize how much you are different. And you can do it, for example, by keeping your own opinion and your own personality in the background and hide your real intent. Don't really reveal what is exactly what you want to research about or learn about. from Columbo that we have to let those guys be the experts. We shouldn't be the smart ones. We should be someone who doesn't understand things, and then they will start explaining us. And we need to always ask for the specifics, because that's where the keys are. And from Miss Marple, a lot of things. For example, staying in the background, don't share our opinions, and make people tell stories and listen to them and react. So that was what I wanted to talk to you today. Thank you. And we should have some time for questions, right? So I also have the slide opened. But if you have questions live, just shoot us. Oh, we have some questions.
Yeah, the Slido is up here as well now, so we can all see it. But if you want to ask questions and you don't want to type it into Slido, you can just raise your hand. I'll give you the microphone and you can ask the question. But till then, we can go through the Slido. So the first question is about empathizing with the person that we are interviewing or testing. How long does it take to empathize with them, to actually get them to feel that you are listening and you want to hear the story?
I think you can do it in a matter of seconds. How much you feel empathy, that's depending on you, right? So now we know already from psychological research that there are people who can empathize more, and there are people who cannot feel empathy at all. So hopefully, if you are a researcher, you are at the other end, so you are a very empathetic person. So feeling empathy is not something that should come very hard for you. But I think, so making the other people feel that you empathize with them is also, it should be on your face. So sometimes you don't even need to say anything, and it shouldn't be a lot of time. To gain their trust, that's something that takes longer. So there you have to do things so that people trust you, and I think that might also be a personality thing, but I think it's something that you can actually train and get better at it. And there are some small tricks. So one of my tricks to get people to trust me is, for example, I always ask their permission to start the recording. So even if it has been something we agreed previously via email, because we always record the session, I always ask them, so do you allow me to record this session? I wouldn't share it anywhere. And then when they say, sure, you can record, then I say, okay, I'm starting the recording now. And that is a small thing, a very small trick, but it gives them the feeling of, I didn't even start recording before they said yes. And this is a small thing how, we get closer. But of course, then it's how you react and how you show your sympathy is one way to get people to trust you. But it's not the psycho way. But you really, you really should be naturally sympathetic and feel for these people. I don't think you can actually make it or fake it.
So you mentioned, or you described how you do the research, and the question is, how often do you talk with the users?
So we have much less researchers, but I think the best way to do research is to do it constantly. So it shouldn't be something, it's not something you should think about. You should have a research session every week, because there is always something you can learn. I know this is an expensive thing that I'm saying, and this is the ideal world, but I think the best times at Prezi, when we had the best research methods, was when we did an interview. Every researcher did an interview or a usability test every week. If you had a prototype, you tested it. If you didn't have a prototype, you run an interview. There's always something you can learn. There's no way, you have a user or client in call and you cannot learn something from them. So, there's no such as too frequent UX research, in my opinion.
Okay. So I think some people think that you work at Slido. So could you tell us a little bit about the company you work for before we answer the questions for the people who asked about Slido, which you most likely would know the answer to? So you work for Prezi.
Yes.
What's Prezi about?
So Prezi is a presentation software, the one I just used.
Cool, okay. That's all.
That was the question?
No. So the question disappeared, so I cannot really read it, but it will be back soon.
So I think the question was how we make sure that the research artifacts is known by everyone, right? How you share research insights, that's the question. And sorry, my sad news for you is that this is the question of the entire UX research industry. And I don't think there is a good way to do that. So, there are usually the two extremes that companies are doing. Either they share everything and the researchers spend most of their time to write down their research results, and nobody reads that. That's one thing we also tried. It's not a good thing. The other end is that we also tried is not writing down anything, but turn it into actionable items. So, for example, you do a usability test, and you stay in the room after the user left, and you define those 3 things that you're going to change in the prototype or the product. This is the other end. This is the very agile way of not writing down anything. Both of these has pros and cons, right? If you spend too much time and nobody reads, that's like wasting your resources. If you don't write down anything, then when you leave the company, your knowledge lives with you. So we tried both. I think the truth is somewhere in between. Try to do some. Actually, Toya had a really good way of summarizing research. I think that was one of his super skills. So what he did is, he wrote a document of all of the research sessions that he've done, and he made like 3 levels of information. So the top level was, the TLDR, the too long didn't read. If you want to take away 5 things from this research project, these are the 3 things or 5 things you should remember. Then there was a middle section when it was like, 3 out of 5 people said this, 4 out of 5 people thought that. So, like a more kind of summary. And then down there were the more extensive notes. If somebody really wanted to know more details, could go there. And even at the end, there was a link to for example, maybe the transcript. So someone can read it word by word. So it's important that, you have like one kind of a summary for anyone. The PM might be only interested in the 5 things. Another researcher might be interested in the complete details, but you need to somehow find a way to tell something to everyone. But I think the best way to share research, if you invite people to the research session, because if they see people struggling with your prototype or, telling about their experiences, that's the best way. And then you don't need to write it down because they will go home and feel for the users and do the changes.
I think it's absolutely amazing that you remember the question. I feel like a waiter, that the question disappeared and I just forget about it, like forgetting an order. So you talked about the interview where the user lied about everything.
Everybody wants to learn about this. So this was a tricky one, and I can tell you what was the mistake. We were working with a recruiter company from London, and the recruiter company revealed too much info when they were recruiting people for the research sessions. And they tell the users that they are looking for people who are using their smartphones to edit presentations. I can tell you there is no one in the planet who does that. Because, when you ask people why they don't do it, they say, the screen is too small, I can't really see, it's very cumbersome. And then one day, there was a woman, and she said, she's always editing presentations on her smartphone. And that already was really suspicious. I was doing that actually with Flame in the room. He was the designer pair. And so, but we were like, oh, cool, finally, we found someone. First of all, rule number 1, if you find someone who you were looking for a long time and never met, and then it seems like you found one, you should be suspicious already. And then, we started to talk to her. And she was sharing very general information. Yeah, I always do this, I always do that, I usually do this, I usually use that tool, and that already is also very suspicious, and a good researcher is always then asking about the specifics, right, like Columbo. So I was asking, okay, could you tell me the last time you edited your presentation on your smartphone? Why was that? And then she started to tell the story, and then, as I was asking for these specific things, like why she did that, and when did this happen, and who was also there, then, it really, she got more and more confused, and the story started in her office and finished up at the client. So, things didn't really were putting together, but it also took me like 25 to 30 minutes to realize that, gosh, probably she's lying. This cannot be true because there are just weird things. Or for example, I asked her, why she's using the phone for this, and she said, oh, because I always have it at hand. And then I said, okay, could you please show me your phone? Like what kind of apps you have? And she was like, a minute. And she went away, and for 5 minutes she was not there. I was like, she said the phone is always at her hand. So things didn't really came together. And then after like 35 minutes, I thanked her for all of the very useful information that she shared. We hung up the phone, and I told Flame, I think she was lying the whole time. And then always what people ask me, and did you pay her for this research? For, she was lying all the time. And of course we did. It was not her fault. And for me as a researcher, so for me as the ethics question, So for me, the most important thing in a research session is that the participant feels good and goes away or goes home feeling that she helped or they helped us a lot. And in this case, that was the same. So I think this person still thinks that she helped us a lot. But who we didn't pay was the recruitment company, because it was their fault to reveal too much for this person, so they let her to lie, actually. So I don't know if I answered all of your questions. I think I said a lot of things. Okay.
So let's jump a little bit, because there is a question about hiring the participants. So you mentioned that you used another company to hire them. I know that later on Prezi had a person in-house who did that. So how does it work now, and what do you tell the people before the research?
So again, don't show your intent, like Brenda. You cannot say you are looking for people who are editing their presentations on there's too much information, okay? What you have to tell them is, first of all, you are looking for participants who are doing a lot of presentations. That's one thing. The second thing is that you have to share that they will need their mobile phone, or you can say this is a mobile research. These things you have to reveal, because you cannot say like, we're doing research, but we don't tell you on what, because people will be anxious already, like, oh my God, they will ask me private information, and then they don't sign up. So you have to say presentations, it's, nothing really bad. Sure, I can tell you about my presentations. And then you need to tell the mobile thing, because they will need their mobile phones on the session. But try to keep it in a very minimum and not reveal more. And then, of course, you have to have a screener form, which I think grew at Prezi with the time. So I think now this is like 20, 25 questions, which I know, basic rule of questionnaires, not to have too many questions, but here it's like a, barrier of entry. If you think it really seriously and you fill in 25 questions, then probably you will show up on the research session and we can trust you, or you are really, you really think it seriously, so that's not an issue. And then you need to ask those questions again in a smart way. So we don't ask you, is that right that you haven't used Prezi in the last times? Because, we always do research with first-time users, so people who never used Prezi. If I ask my question like this, they know that the good answer is no, of course I didn't use Prezi. But if I ask, how much experience you have with Prezi? I never used it. I used it in university or college. I used it a few years ago. I used it a few months ago. I'm using it at the moment. I'm a Prezi user. Then, they don't know what is the good answer. If it's something, we are looking for people who use Prezi or don't, so they cannot really, turn it in a way that they get into the research without actually being a good candidate. So if you ask your questions the right way, then they cannot lie to you. And yeah, I recommend you to have so if you do research, I know that I'm always talking about the ideal world. If you do a lot of research, then I recommend you to have a recruiter internally, because I think that's the best part of a UX researcher's job, is to find the research participants. So if you do a lot of research, it's best to have a person at the company. And we tried a lot of recruiter companies, which never worked out, because the reason is they have a database. And then you tell them, I need sales and marketing people who do a lot of presentations and who use cloud software and have a smartphone, So you define what kind of people you want. And then they can send you these people in the first few months, and then you have excellent candidates, and then their database run out, and then you get very weird user candidates. And then, so there will be like your most memorable, the lying lady and the MLM agent, and then, these weird people are starting to coming to your research sessions, and that's not good. And then you always need to switch to another company, and first of all, it's more expensive, and it's not working really well. So I think an internal person is better, or do your own recruitment, but that's painful.
I think the survey or the questionnaire started at 4 questions, and it later grew to 25. So that was pretty amazing, all the questions that started appearing as the research was progressing. So the last questions we have here is about asking the questions back to the user. So they ask if they clicked on the right place. How do you return the question back to them?
So you cannot say, I don't know, because you are the researcher who is researching this product, so you most probably know, right? You just cannot tell them whether it's the right place or not. So like the very obvious thing is something you can do only once, ask them back, do you think you clicked at the right place? And then sometimes, they will look at you and say, I don't know, that's why I asked you. So this is not probably the best way to do that. So I think the good way to ask back, because, why you don't answer the question, because you are there to learn from this person, and you should always maximize to learn the most. So when they ask, did I click at the right place? You can ask them, what would help you to decide this question? And maybe, then they would say, oh, because when I usually, in this other application I'm using, when I click on save, I get a message that it got saved. And then, you learned a lot of new things, right? You learned that they didn't know they clicked at the right place because they didn't get a confirmation. So you always should maximize the learning by asking these smart questions. So always try to understand, or simply ask, why you are unsure about this? What makes you insecure? Why you are not so sure about this? And then you can learn much more.
All right, I think that's it. So thank you very much for all the knowledge you shared with us today. I think Zsuzsa deserves a big hand of applause.
Thank you.
All right, we still have lots of drinks and lots of cakes over there, so we will take a short break, about 10 minutes. Use it, talk with your friends, talk with the other people, get to know each other, get some cakes, and we will be back in 10 minutes. So we will start in 1 minute. So feel free to grab the last cookies, as I was corrected, and take a seat. And we will hear a little bit more about designers and alchemists from Flame in 1 minute. All right. I hope your seat wasn't taken with so many people in the room. Okay, so we have another person that I had the pleasure of working with for 1 year, and I can tell you he is an amazing person, and he didn't tell me to not tell you that, so that's cool as well. Yeah, it's true, yeah, as he says. So there was one day at Prezi where Flame made a workshop for the whole company, and anybody who wanted to come could come there. And Prezi is a company where they develop tools for presentation. Flame is a designer in a company developing presentations. So what was this workshop about? It was about brewing beer. He brought beer into the company and he spent the whole day brewing it for all the employees. And then about a month or 2 months later on, we actually drank the beer in one of the workshops. So that's the proof. Flame is amazing. So, without further ado, let me introduce Flame.
Thank you. So actually I have a real name. And my real name is Gábor Hoffer. And I'll tell you. So I know those people. And I'm amazing and they're not, obviously. So. Okay. So my real name is Gábor Hoffer, and I came from the glorious city of Budapest, but I don't live in Budapest actually. This doesn't work. I work at Logmain right now as a director of user experience in one of the business units, and we worked at Prezi with all these people actually, and so there's 5 of us, because David is also here. So many Prezi people. But I do work at Logmain right now, which is kind of like a little bit bigger company than Prezi. It works with a lot of products, and I work mainly with LastPass. So if you hate LastPass, that's kind of up to me to make it better, or like make you unhate it. I don't like it either, yet. I used to work on this one, like the editor and all kinds of stuff around it, as all of these people. And of course now I work with this. Yeah, it has some work to do. And I got my name in a band where I was singing, where Zimo, who sits there, was the drummer and the leader of the band. I don't sing anymore, but he tries to persuade me to do it again in December. It's not successful yet. But I got the name there. And I'm kind of fascinated by little facts. So this is, I don't live in the castle, but I live here. So this is the castle where the most famous king of Hungary, King Matthias, was jailing Vlad Tepes, alias Dracula. And that's where I live. And kind of like this is an example of how I get into rabbit holes of Wikipedia and about learning stuff that doesn't really make sense or it doesn't really give me any useful information. And while digging deep into those holes, I was looking at actually psychology and psychological research, and I was reading about, I think it was Carl Jung, and how Carl Jung was building up his research processes and everything, and I stumbled upon alchemy. And then, you know, I read. Actually, I pitched the idea of talking about alchemy first to Taya on the train, because we used to take the same train on Fridays and had beers on the train. Glorious days. And you know, as I read through, it kind of came apparent to me that a lot of analogies it has with design. So I decided to, you know, dig deep and kind of figure out what's there. So are there any alchemists in this room? Because then I would give them this microphone and maybe it would be better. Not yet. Okay. So there are a lot of stereotypes surrounding alchemists. Are there any designers in this room? Almost. So, okay, so kind of like a lot of stereotypes are surrounding design as well. So, an alchemist, you know, has a beard, does magic instead of science, and makes gold. So that's what usually people believe. And designers has a beard, I mean the male ones, hopefully, and they make art and makes things pretty. So that's, if you like walk on the street and ask people, this is what designers do. So how to step beyond the stereotypes of what alchemy or design is to, you know, actually looking at it. So as I said, I really like Wikipedia, so this is what Wikipedia writes about design. So design is the creation of a plan or convention for the construction of an object, system, or measurable human interaction. It's very difficult to understand what this means, but actually designers are making plans to make better humans or make humanity better. And you know, design developed in many, many years, but basically it came from craftsmanship. So people were working on all kinds of stuff. You know, they were masons, they were doing textiles or whatever else, they were working with wood. But at those times, you know, the designer wasn't a separate thing. So if you had a craftsman, then the craftsman was actually designing you a chair, and the craftsman built the chair, and then you were using it, buying it, and so on. And then came the industrial revolutions, and that kind of changed everything. So all these professions started to separate and industrialize. And this was kind of like the scary time for the craftsmen, but because, you know, like what happens with human labor, what happens with the stuff we were doing. But kind of like humanity figured out that it's much better, it's much more effective way to work with stuff. And then came in especially in the 50s and 60s, it was the golden age of advertising and graphic design, where really the profession of design separated from everything else. You know, there were purely people who were purely working with applied design. And then, you know, like a lot of things happened with print and then graphical user interfaces, digital design, and then, you know, design thinking, web design, everything. Like this is kind of 60s to 2000. And then now there are a lot of buzzwords surrounding design, UX, you know, interaction design, UI, augmented reality, VR, AI, bots, everything. So now it's like more segregated than ever. Everyone is doing something else. Everyone is doing something different, and it's very, very hard to put your finger on it. But basically, we can go back to that simple fact that designers are still, even though working in different professions or different titles, they are trying to make plans to make, you know, better humans or better things for humans. So why do we design? Basically, the goal is to understand and make life for humans better. And I say humans because that's usually what design is pointed towards. So less so for the environment or less so for animals, as you might notice by global warming and so on. So humans are very preoccupied by themselves and less about other things in this planet. So this was kind of about design, so let's look at alchemy in analogy of that. So what is alchemy? Who heard the word, or who knows anything about that? Okay, so like the word is kind of well known. I'm sure you have seen a movie where there was like a pointy hat guy doing something. So alchemy is a proto and pseudo science. Proto science means that it's kind of, it was before science was science. So, you know, kind of science became science after the Industrial Revolution. Before that, it wasn't really considered a separate thing. So people were, you know, figuring out things, and they were the alchemists, and other people were just doing things. And pseudoscience is because some parts of alchemy has been proven, or some of it hasn't been proven, but they are not scientific. For example, astrology, for example. So that's like not proven and not really unproven either. But there's no scientific method to prove it actually, currently. So there are parts of it which kind of became science later, and parts of it which became like un-science later, like astrology. So this is a famous painting of an alchemist, and you know, you have the usual stereotypes, a guy with a beard, kind of like in a magical, somewhat magical environment. But if you look deeper, this is kind of a scholar. So he's actually wearing a hat, and probably he's a man of the church. He's actually looking at a book, so he's trying to learn something, and he's working with chemical equipment. Also, he's learning about humans as well. So it's like not so much a magical thing anymore. You know, it's like just a man of science. You know, tries to learn things, tries to work with chemistry, tries to work with humans. So basically, plans to make human life better. So let's go through the history of alchemy quickly. Minding the time, it's going to be long. I'm trying to go quick. So alchemy is kind of rooted in ancient Egypt, where metallurgy, or like working with metals, started. I mean, in an industrial scale. But how could it be, you know, like the methodologies or the ideas behind alchemy rooted there? So, you know, every empire is based on cheap labor. And Egyptians were very famous for slave labor. Everyone read the Bible. And because of slave labor, you know, Egyptians, like the Egyptians, had a lot of time because they didn't have to work. So basically, cultures that have time can concentrate on science. So first learning from alchemy is that, you know, if you take your time to learn stuff, then you will actually learn it and not just do it. It kind of continued in, still in Egypt, but Egypt was worked by the Greek. So the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt, or the Hellenistic Egypt, was famous for the Library of Alexandria, which burned down. And also, I won't go into more detail about this, but this is Hermes. So most of the Egyptian and Greek and Roman gods are based on the same tree, and some of the alchemist symbols are based around that. This is Hermes. And the learning here is actually save your files. So we know nothing about this period of time, only about like fragments of stuff, because, you know, everything was burned down. So people didn't really share their knowledge. They collected them into libraries, they kept it there, and they didn't really intend to have that knowledge shared to anybody else besides some of the chosen ones in Hellenistic Egypt. And then we don't know shit about it. So since the Egyptian culture kind of went down, the Greeks weren't on the top yet, or again, and the Romans were kind of going down as well. All the knowledge and all the science was done by Arabic countries. So this is a very famous alchemist, Jaber, or called Geber by the Germans or the Europeans. And actually, he was the first who used or started to develop chemistry equipment. And actually, the word alchemy comes from him. And what's interesting about him is that he was the first time who actually started making notes of experiments. which is a very important thing because, you know, if you don't make notes of what you were doing, then you will not remember later, and you cannot really share that, as I mentioned earlier. And also, he didn't have tools and processes, so what he did is that he created chemical equipment, and he actually wrote down how to use them. And then what happened is that he started to circulate this in Europe. So actually, as you can see, there's like 400, and this is the Middle Ages. So in these 1,000 years, which is a very long time, these Arabic scripts made by these Arabic scholars like Jaber were circulated amongst Europe. And this is what like most of European science is rooted in. So it's basically most of the Arabic texts were translated to Latin. What's interesting here is that this is also a famous painting of an alchemist using chemical equipment and everything. The interesting thing here is that Middle Ages, what do you think what would happen to someone who claims that, okay, I'm making gold, or, you know, I'm making life, or I know more than God, or something like that? And probably they would, like, put you on a stick and burn. And what alchemists did really, really well in the Middle Ages is that they avoided burning, because they didn't go against the church at any point in time. And also the other thing they did is that they used actually the kind of like the confinements of the church, so basically like scholars or people of the church to, you know, write down their findings. So they used all the funds, all the good things that was provided by the church, and they didn't go against it. So they used it for science. And the learning here is try to get along with your stakeholders, you know, because you get the money from them, and, you know, you don't have to work in the shadows, as we had to do it a lot of times. In design, I'm sure this is not unknown to any designers when you know, you have a better idea and you have to work behind someone's back. But you don't have the funds for that. And so later came, you know, kind of like the ending of the Middle Ages, where it was already allowed to experiment on people and to work with people. So kind of like most of the efforts of alchemy was concentrated on people, on humans, as I talked about that earlier. And actually Paracelsus was one of the first who wrote down these findings on how to cure people from different diseases, or different diseases meant what for the human race. And really like the big finding here was that, you know, you have to focus all these findings, all this science to people. And this is kind of where it's dated, where no one was focused anymore on, you know, chemistry for the sake of chemistry, or, you know, metals for the sake of metals. But this is where alchemy or science turned to people, because they are the reason, you know, you are trying to make the world a better place. And you can know a lot about them if you're as a good researcher as Zsuzsa or Toya. And so, later in time, who knows this guy, Sir Isaac Newton? Everyone knows. You know, Sir Isaac Newton, everyone knows Isaac Newton as the, you know, a man of science who came up with gravity. But pretty much no one knows that Isaac Newton spent roughly 70–80% of his time on alchemy instead of actually working in physics or chemistry. But Newton's dog burned his alchemy writings in 1693. So we don't really have much of that left. But there are some writings made by Newton later claiming that most of his work was actually concentrated around alchemy. So, you know, not everything is what it seems. He seems to be a man of science, someone who's known by, you know, studying gravity. But actually he was studying more humans through alchemy. So, you know, be open to learn and discover anything. Don't assume, but go and ask. Go and, you know, figure out for yourself. Later came the industrial revolutions, first and then second. And as I mentioned, this was a scary time because humans didn't really, you know, stand a chance against machines. You wanted to, you were, you know, a hard laborer. Maybe 2 days later you didn't have a job. But this was also a glorious time for science because this is one of the first laboratories conceived in the United Kingdom. There were like great machines done working with metals and everything else. So actually, this has created that space, what was there for the Egyptians, where, you know, people didn't have to work that much anymore, you know, just to get by. And they could actually use this time to think. And more people could do that, and more people could learn, and more people could, you know, work in these laboratories. So don't fear change, embrace it, and, you know, use it as you want it. Yeah, and I also already mentioned Carl Jung. So actually most of Carl Jung's writings around psychology are rooted in alchemical texts. And he was actually learning and researching a lot of those. And this is some stuff that Jung came up. So these are archetypes in dreams. And those are very, very similar to those, which is tarot cards. So tarot cards also symbolize archetypes of the human mind. And this is what was what Carl Jung used as a basis of his archetypes, which is used in psychoanalysis of dreams. So it's an interesting thing that even, you know, in the 20th century, people were looking back at alchemy and used it as, you know, real science. And this is where, kind of like, that's the turning point where alchemy becomes science. And also from humans, really, like most of these people who were fascinated with alchemical texts, you know, they were fascinated with the human mind instead of just humans as, you know, like mortal beings. And the mind has the answers, but Zsuzsa illustrated it really well, that it's very hard to get those answers out of a human mind. And now we are here, and there are a lot of stuff around alchemy, and alchemy is really built on symbols. And some of that was because in the Middle Ages they wanted to hide in, you know, texts what they've been talking about, and also for some reason they didn't really wanted to share their findings. Everyone was really like precious about them, and they hid it in symbolism. So this is actually the main symbols of alchemy, and it's very, very similar to what's in Harry Potter. And it symbolizes the prima materia, which is the kind of like the main subject of alchemy, which is gold. So gold is a really nice thing. It's easy to form and keeps its form. It does not dissolve or oxidate in like usual substances, where you would think, and it's very rare and hard to find. So kind of these are the qualities which created gold as the prime material or something that fascinated people. But it's really also a symbol. So alchemists never really tried to make gold, actually. So what they've been striving for is perfecting metals, perfecting human life, and they were really fascinated about perfection. So gold is really only a symbol of perfection. So alchemists, I don't know of any who actually made gold. A lot of them claimed it, though, and I'll tell a story later about that. So that was the never-ending quest of alchemy. And can perfection be found? I don't know. But really what they tried is not just the perfection of the body, but the perfection of the mind as well, because these work together. Oh yeah, and I don't think perfection can be reached. You can try for it, but you have to accept at some point that you will never ever reach it. But it's kind of like a treat for all designers, you know, like always wanting to make everything better and better iteratively. Another main symbol of alchemy is Trinity. Actually, it's very, you know, in kind of like all religions, it has a symbolic meaning. Number 3 and the Trinity. But alchemical Trinity is based on 3 symbols: salt, sulfur, and mercury. And these symbolize something else, actually. So it's kind of like a circulation of life, and they mean body, spirit, and mind. And what it means actually is that you know, your body experience or like comes alive with the spirit, and then your mind tries to make sense of the world, and that changes your body, your spirit, and the mind. And this is kind of like a you know, like a cycle of life, basically. So your body is what creates reality, and it can have an action. Your spirit is your consciousness, and your mind has thoughts. And you know, when you don't really think about stuff, then that's what an instinct is, that it comes from your consciousness. So this is what alchemists call life experience. This is how you experience life. It's a cycle of these three things. And, you know, your body is creating reality, and you're aware of things, and you're understanding things. And when you're aware of something, but you're just using it, that's intuition. This is actually what user experience is. So it's very, very similar, and very apparent that it's using the same metaphors for, you know, writing down something that's a cycle of how you experience things. So basically, user experience is also built in this trinity of usability, awareness and accessibility, and understandability. And if you go through all of these and you nail it, then you can create a good user experience. Just as alchemists were trying to find out how to create a good life experience through these three things. And so you can nail how people will use something, who will use it, and why will they use it. So you have to understand these three things. You're working for people, they are the spirit of what you're dealing with. It's key to understand the mind, that's the mind of it, and all this experience creates change in people. And then they experience it again, and then they have to create other thoughts from it, and then it changes them again. So throughout your whole life and throughout the user experience of what you are creating, you're changing people. And actually the aim of design is, as I mentioned like 10 times, that to make that experience better and to make human life better. So if you circulate around these, try to, you know, work with these to make things better for people. So I mentioned archetypes in Carl Jung, and archetypes come from dreams. And Carl Jung said that the dream is a little hidden door in the innermost and most secret recesses of the soul. It's kind of the mirror of the subconscious mind, because then you don't have control over what you are thinking. It's more, you know, it's creating this circle itself. So everyone dreams, and everyone has symbols while they are dreaming. And these symbols, what you are dreaming with, it's like just a couple of examples: a mother, someone who's like a ruling figure over you, or there are lots of these. I think there are 20-something main archetypes. These are universal prototypes for ideas that are in your dreams. And they can be used to interpret these observations. So how it's used in psychoanalysis is that you have a dream, and you write down that sequence of happenings, and then you try to interpret them using these archetypes. So like, does this remind you of your mother, and so on. And these universal archetypes are used in art a lot. And as I mentioned, they are used in divination or tarot cards and so on. And these are all based on this universal understanding of which exists in every people's mind. So these are general, archetypes are general, and they are good to drive motivation and empathy towards your thoughts. So personas, as you know, are generalized prototypes for behaviors, and they also can be used to interpret observations. And you know, everyone has seen personas. These are probably bad examples. But personas are very specific to things. So they are specific to your subject, they are specific to your product. They have to be researched a lot to be understood, but they are really good to drive understanding and empathy. So archetypes are very general, and personas are very specific. So an archetype is really what you want your product to be. That's the archetype of the product. It can be a mother, it can be a ruling figure, it can be something relatable. And the persona is who your users are and how they behave with that archetype. So an example for an archetype is, Mac and the PC. That's how they figured, how their product should behave. So this is an example of that. And persona, I guess you heard about that a lot. So you can use this to your advantage. If you want, you can create archetypes of your product and not just personas who try to use them. And the last concept that I wanted to mention from alchemy is called panacea. So panacea is the universal remedy to everything. And it's also called the philosopher's stone. So actually Harry Potter has a lot of alchemical background, like the research behind it. That's why the symbol is very apparent as well. So the philosopher's stone is in fact not just used, in alchemical theory to make gold or to transform metals, but it creates panacea, which is a universal remedy, and actually that's a Greek goddess. So panacea's goal is not the creation of itself, so not the creation of the stone itself, but to be used to have a universal remedy over people. So it's the ultimate tool in a way for alchemists. So if you can create it, then you have a tool which is good for everything. It can cure everything, it can transform metals, it's good for everything. So basically this is again a symbolic thing for alchemists to thrive for. It's kind of like gold as for perfection and panacea as for the ultimate tool which I can use for everything. So this is why they try to perfect their equipment, this is why they try to perfect their writing, their communication, everything else. So what do you need from a perfect tool? It should be fast and effective. It should be very collaborative. You have to use it with other people, especially in alchemy. So it's very, very apparent that the ultimate tool now, as we are mostly working with software, is an integrated development environment. So, it's good for everything. It's fast and effective. You can see what you're doing, and you can test. You can do everything in it. So this is kind of a way where design tools are going as well. Everyone is trying to create the ultimate tool which you use for everything, basically, throughout the whole design process. So they are trying to create integrated design environments for people. This is Figma. So they're trying to merge tools into one package where, throughout this whole process, throughout this whole work, you can use it as one. So again, like these companies are really thriving to create your panacea, your ultimate tool, which you can use for wireframes, UI, prototyping, handovers, and everything else. So a couple of companies are doing this currently. InVision is really, really trying, very expensive. UXPin is also, compared to InVision, is a smaller player. Figma is really coming up. Annual Sketch is kind of one of the main tools what I'm guessing a lot of people use here as well. So all of these tools are going to the same direction. So everyone is trying to create an ultimate package for you, the kind of the philosopher's stone. Sketch maybe even has it somewhere there. But there's no perfect tool for everyone. So this is why actually no one could nail it yet, because there is no universal tool, there's no universal remedy, there's no, one pill you take and everything is solved. So you have to choose what's most fitting to your process. Even amongst these tools, there are many, many differences. So what else is needed in a perfect tool? So consistency and to be closer to code, to be more collaborative. So of course, I'm guessing in this meetup series you've heard all about design systems, and it's a hot topic, so I won't go into details on that. You can check out Design Systems repo or the other collection sites, but that is again one thing that it's very analog to what alchemists try to do. So a story. How much time do I have left? Okay, 5 minutes. I can do that. So, good story from an alchemist. So this is Johann Friedrich Böttger. Who can guess how old this guy is? So actually, I think when this picture, or like when this painting was made, he was 24. Maybe. So yeah, the 17th century wasn't as forgiving on people as now. So he started alchemy in an early age. Here he's 16 on this picture. So I don't look that bad anymore. So here he's 16, he started alchemy and in Berlin, and he claimed to have made the philosopher's stone. So he claimed that he can make gold. That was very interesting to you know, a lot of other scholars and alchemists. He called it a tincture, which meant that he was making a liquid from the philosopher's stone which can make gold. Very interesting thing in Berlin. So this is Augustus II the Strong, which is a neighboring country's leader. And he ran out of money, and he wanted to do some wars and everything, you know, and actually like running a country costs a lot of money. So it's very apparent that, you know, I'm living in the 17th century, I'm the leader of a country, and one guy in another country claims that he can make gold. So, you know, what do? I take that person, I put him to Dresden, and I jail him because, you know, he invited Brodger to his, to his castle, and, you know, he told him that, okay, guy, make me gold. Like, I'm poor, I want to run this country. And he couldn't. So he gave him, actually, he was a very forgiving patriarch, so he gave him 2 years in Dresden. Like, go to prison, you can work, you will have all the equipment you need, you cannot leave the castle, but you have to work. And he couldn't. So, and this is where he tries to do it actually. There's even a painting from that. So that's same guy, and that's Brodger trying to prove that he's making gold. He couldn't. So he still couldn't. So actually he sent him to Meissen, another city, and in Meissen he gave him another chemist, so to partner up and to collaborate with. And with that chemist, they tried to come up with ways of making gold, but instead of making gold, they came up with making porcelain. So at that point in time, early 18th century, porcelain was only available to import from China. And you can imagine in 1700 something, it was a very expensive thing to get anything from China. So basically it was good as gold. So in the end, these two guys in Meissen actually succeeded in making gold for this leader of that country. It was Prussia. And it's a very cool thing because, you know, they focused on something. They didn't get the desired outcome, but they actually came up with something better. So they made this I think he was a prince. They made his prince understand what they can do through, you know, making him understand that, okay, we came up with a way to make porcelain. It's better than gold for you. You can sell it everywhere in Europe. You can make it for cheap. It's the same thing as the Chinese. It wasn't exactly the same, but it was very, very good. So it made him a rich person. And kind of the moral of the story is that alchemists never really reached for making gold. They just wanted to make science. You know, they've been working in chemistry. They claimed all kinds of stuff to get, you know, the money of stupid people, to get funds for their chemistry experiments. But if they came up with something and they could make other people understand that to, you know, okay, we can't make gold, but we made you something good instead, or we came up with a theory instead, like archetypes, or we, you know, we did something good for science, then usually that was a really good thing for everyone. So some learnings for today. Share what you know, you can build up an effective tool so you can do whatever you want. You can be the best in what you do. But if you don't share your discoveries to as many people as possible, it won't last. And a team is more than a group of people, of course. Collaborate with others, as in that story. First understand and then create. So the most fundamental principle, as I said, is that the mind creates reality. So without understanding how the mind creates that reality and what the mind understands, you cannot really create a reality that anyone wants or needs. So first try to understand that, and then you can solve the problems. Experiment and don't be afraid to try new things. And don't stop when something blows in your face. Try again, maybe that blows in your face as well. You might find some gold in your experiments. And last thing is that belief is stronger than reason. So for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, people believed that there are people in this world who might do in some magical way they can make gold. And those are the people who we call alchemists. And they believed it so strong that even if no one could ever prove it or no one could ever demonstrate it, still, like people for thousands of years believed it. So belief is much, much stronger than reason. If people believe that you are the best, if people believe that you can make your company better, you can make their company better, you can make the UI the best, then you are. So if they believe it, just do it. And in the end, everyone will get what they want if you are actually good at what you're doing. So learn to sell it. And are there any alchemists in this room? This never works though. Thanks for... Okay, I'll give you a bro fist later. So thank you, that was it. And yeah, I can answer any questions. There might be weird ones, I hope. Thank you.
Okay, and it was pretty incredible look at design through the alchemy. So at the beginning you mentioned that you are a singer or you were a singer, which of course prompted the very first question to ask if you can sing for people in here.
I won't. No.
That's a shame. Maybe after 3 beers we can change his mind.
Oh yeah, that's true.
We'll see how that goes. So how can you sell the alchemy of design to people? So basically, how can you sell design to people?
Okay, sell design to people. So I think without really thinking deeply about, what problem are you solving, and that's like ultimately the role of design. You cannot really sell anything. So basically selling design to people is making them understand that they want to sell something to other people. And in order to do that, you have to, think about what that solves and actually, solve those problems through that product. So, yeah, that's about it. And how to sell alchemy, how did I sell it to you?
I don't know, I was drunk.
On the
it was
train.
Easy.
Hey, we weren't drunk yet.
You were very passionate about it. That's what sold it.
Might be true. I was drunk too.
Even that was the belief, right? I didn't know what you were talking about, but you were so passionate about it that I just had to listen to you, everything you said. And eventually it started making lots of sense. And I really found a couple of interesting points in our talks in the train with the beer. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Beer makes everything better.
Yeah, beer makes everything good.
Especially Slovak beer.
If you start naming some beer companies, you'll have promotion here, I guess.
Mm.
There's actually one thing I wanted to ask you personally. So you mentioned there in your talk that the men of science at that time were considered witches or wizards if they did something really strange. People would burn them. And I see something similar right now happening as well, as you mentioned, that you have to work behind the stakeholders' back because you have some design, you know why it's there, you know why it's good. You have your reasons and years of experience doing it. And then there is this person who has different experience, wants to sell something or whatever, who doesn't believe you and thinks that he or she knows better than you. So how do you make this person understand it? And I know you just answered that a little bit, but...
Yeah, I think in small steps. So sometimes you have to demonstrate a small thing that, through that understanding you can make a small something that yielded better results than without it. So if you can, build that, build that practice up and, make them believe or make them understand and believe, because later they have to believe you, then it works out. But again, sometimes it's like you have to work around their backs.
Yeah, I personally also think that you have to make them believe. That's one of the things. And the small steps are very important in this one. So it's good to know that.
Maybe passion works.
But it's also one thing that I find missing when we address this in design community is that when we talk about these stakeholders, we always say like, hey, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He thinks he's better, etc. That he's not listening to what I'm saying as a designer. And I think personally, and you can correct me or tell me what you think about it, is that we as designers kind of do the same. Like, we have our designs in mind, and do we know what the other person is looking for? Are we checking, doing the research beforehand, so we actually know what to tell him and how to sell the design?
No, I think everyone is full of stereotypes about other people. So like, usually designers hate marketing people. And, it's because of stereotypes. It's like, well, they don't know what they are doing and they have a lot of money and they want to spend the whole thing on, I don't know, like stupid advertisements or surveys or whatever. And, I think it's also, again, about understanding. So I have to understand, what they work for, what they are measured for, what are their reasoning around what they do. And if I understand, I can work with that. So maybe I can show them a better way to do what they are trying to do, or maybe I can show them an alternative or whatever else. So it's, again, I think it's understanding. So it's not just like taking something for a fact that they're stupid people. They're not. So probably they're the same as clever as I am or anybody else. Same for like sales. Same for executives. Everyone thinks everyone else is stupid just because they don't understand people. So actually, I think, who said that? Yeah, it was Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said that I don't like that person, so I have to know him better. And I think this is the kind of like the ultimate truth behind. So if you don't like people, then you probably don't understand them. Setting aside the personality traits, of course. So that might not help.
So as a designer, what's your favorite color?
Yellow.
Yellow.
It's unusable on UI, so gold, yeah, gold maybe, okay. Gold and yellow, or maybe because of gold, I don't know, yellow.
So do UX researchers always pitch what they preach with storytelling?
So we are kind of, yeah, because we worked at Prezi, we try to do that. I wouldn't say we were trained to do that, but we worked so many years there that we kind of learned the powers of analogies, metaphors, storytelling. So yeah, I think it's a powerful tool. As working for a presentation company, of course, it's very apparent that it is. But even without that, telling a story to someone you can be much more passionate about that. And I think it goes through really well than, just like hard facts. But you have to have facts, though.
All right, are there any other questions you would like to ask? All right.
I still won't sing.
Still won't sing? Well, we still haven't given you any beer.
Yeah,
so
I watched too much Frozen 2, so I can only sing, I think, I might be able to sing from Frozen 2, but I'm not going to do that now.
Okay, if you want to hear Flame sing, stick around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that were our two talks, and we can pack it up later. It's okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's it. We had our two talks. I think they were absolutely incredible. I loved the one about detectives, and I loved the one about the alchemists, so I love them both. And before there are people there waving at me, showing me something. I have no idea, but I'm not alchemist, I cannot read your mind, sorry. Okay, so I would like to thank all of you for coming here, listening, learning, If you have anything you would like to tell us, you can leave the post-it or paper in the feedback box, and we will check it out. We're always trying to improve it. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Or you can just tell us in person. I would also like to thank our partners, Slovak User Experience Association, which is basically covering most of the user experience in Slovakia. Sajik. Who of you heard of Sajik? Like 5 people. Do you know you are inside Sajik right now? So they have these awesome places, awesome offices. I think they won the Office of the Year, maybe a year back or something like that. So they have really incredible spaces. We are happy that they let us use them. We also would like to thank Ilka, who baked the cookies, and Veronica, who baked the cookies as well. So Ilka is here, sitting right there among you, waving, very shy. So thank you for the amazing cookies and the cakes and the pies and everything that was there. And I'm sad that Otvorena Hra is not here today, but such is life. Either way, you are all welcome to stick around, talk with each other, get to know each other, network a little bit, finish all the sweets and the drinks that are there. And if you wait too long, you actually might hear Flame singing. So it's up to you. But if you need to hurry home, you can do that as well. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a nice evening.